Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Panchakalpatruvescha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. My Dandavat Pranam devotees. So I am in an expedited way. We have so many services to do today, and our weather here is not so great, so I have to kind of start to navigate how I'm going to get it done. But I wanted to answer two questions for one devotee who had written in. One question I didn't answer the first time. That I answered part of a question that he wrote, and then he had a second question, and I want to try to address those two questions this morning. So I'm going to actually pull the questions up so I can just quote them directly. So the first question was about the nature of the relationship between Bhakti Devi and Srimati Radhika. So that question I already answered on a previous question and answer session, and the second question was about a particular phrase. So the phrase is Bhakti Devi ki raksha karani hoite hai. So in Hindi, obviously, this is a phrase that we must always defend or protect Bhakti Devi. So his question was that he's heard this phrase in a lecture in one of the temples, and it seemed very important given the sacred feminine nature of Bhakti Devi. So I'm not, in this particular case, the direct spiritual meaning here would be that, of course, always Bhakti Devi, meaning Bhakti Shakti, or the practice of Bhakti and everything which is related to Bhakti Shakti must always be protected. So that's on an individual level, on a collective level. The mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu must always also be protected because it represents Bhakti Devi. As I mentioned many times before, within the Pancha Tattva, Sri Gadadhar is the representation of Srimati Radhika. Not representation, is Srimati Radhika and is Bhakti Shakti. That Bhakti Shakti is our very means of realizing our eternal nature of being dasata to Krishna, and with specificity meaning a particular relationship with Krishna. So in an individual sense, obviously, we have to protect our bhakti. Why? Because there are always so many influences which come to, just by the nature of the material world, come to attack the very principle of spiritual life at any level. What to speak of at the highest level, which is the level of bhakti. Secondly, our own particular karmic portfolio, which will be inclusive of all of the sanskars of our material past, also comes to bear when we're trying to unfold in bhakti. So we have to protect our bhakti against our own selves. So, and the way that we do that is obviously nothing new. There's no reinventing the wheel, as I say. But the process which was given by our acharyas, then we follow that, and that is itself the protection or the shield or the armor in order to carry out unfolding in spiritual life, in spite of the various things that have to be navigated by our personal past sanskars or impressions, and the current impressions which are given to us by what we see right now in the material world with our parabdha karma, which means that karma which is unfolding right now. So yes, bhakti has to be protected individually, collectively as well. Collectively, Sriman Mahaprabhu descended to give the highest type of bhakti. Chiraratadam nija guptavitam swanama premamrita atyudara apamra yovitatara gora. So this statement is really important because he's giving the highest thing to the lowest common denominator, so to speak. So in the Kali Yuga especially, there are so many faults. We know that. Kalaya dosha nidhe rajan. That Kali Yuga is considered to be like an ocean of faults. But the one glorious thing in the Kali Yuga is the presence of the Sankirtan movement And in this particular day of Brahma, it is called Danya Kali because Sriman Mahaprabhu has appeared. So those extremely valuable teachings that have been given by Sriman Mahaprabhu, they have to be protected in a collective sense by everyone who is representative of Mahaprabhu at all times. We see even right now, and I don't want to make this because it could be like a whole separate class, and I've actually spoken to some degree on this before, that a great deal of the conceptions of Sriman Mahaprabhu and our Guru Varga has come under attack because we don't live the same insulated lives that, you know, were formerly done, and mostly in the Western world, because in India, everything has always been a balance between ashram life and vyavaharic life or external life, grihastha life. But in the West, when our Srila Prabhupada first came, there was emphasis on ashram life because the insulation was needed in order to put us firmly on the path with good footing of bhakti. Of course, now in the West and pretty much all over the world, the dynamics have also changed, where many people are living just, you know, grihastha life with jobs, living more in the external world. And as I've mentioned, therefore, in the larger body of devotees in the world, things are more porous, meaning it's more probable and possible for external influences to come in. And we see it all the time. Probably we'll do another video at some point regarding this issue because it is so important. And I think that's one of the elements of protecting bhakti is being careful about vetting various things which come from the external environment and allowing them to seep into either the lexicon or our common parlance that we use. Like, for instance, there's certain words which are popular in the New Age community which have various meanings and which, you know, maybe someone came up with at some point and somehow entered into our spiritual parlance among devotees because maybe we were preaching in a New Age community or something. But now those words with their connotated meanings and everything else start to take some kind of prominence, and even some devotees will use that to challenge direct scriptural authority or the authority of Shastra and everything else. So we do have to be extremely careful to protect bhakti in that collective sense, where we make sure that the purity of the teachings of Mahaprabhu, coming all the way down to our Srila Prabhupada, to our Srila Gurudev, that they're kept intact, because these teachings are the via medium to unfolding to the spiritual reality. And if we don't protect it and we allow it to be either corrupted or conflated with other things within the material realm, then the possibility of aparad comes, the possibility of misconception comes, apasiddhanta comes, and in this way things become spoiled. So this statement that he mentioned, Bhakti Devi ki raksha karane hoita hai, karana hoita hai, it is important that we have to protect bhakti both on a individual and collective basis. And forgive my Hindi. My Hindi suffers. If I'm in India for some time, it gets better. And in the West, even though my wife is constantly bugging me to practice Hindi with her because we like to listen to our Srila Gurudev's lectures in Hindi. So and in Hindi, Srila Gurudev, a lot of his lectures are very nuanced sometimes, and in Hindi, there's certain things that you sometimes don't get even in English, so forth. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. So, yes, it is very important to protect Bhakti Devi. I don't know the context of the statement that was made in the class. And like I said, even sometimes now, there is conflation between material issues and spiritual issues. So if this was related to, because at the end of it, you mentioned, given the sacred and feminine nature of Bhakti Devi. So I don't know if in that class somehow or another something came up regarding protection of women within our Vaishnava Mandal, which is also a valuable and important issue. But we have to be careful not to conflate two things together. Like sometimes if we want to speak about a particular social issue or something, and then we take something from the teachings within Bhakti and kind of conflate them to get the point about a particular social issue across, that sometimes can be a little dangerous. So we want to be careful with that, right? Because it doesn't mean that a material social issue is not valuable, but it can't necessarily be conflated with spiritual reality. In fact, just recently, and I think this was my fault in great part because I didn't catch the backdrop or the nuance of what was going on, but I just saw a post regarding Queen Kunti, and I won't repeat it because it's a little pinching to me. So, but anyway, there's a post that was kind of conflating, child abuse or abuse and so forth. And the devotee who made the post, somebody asked him the question, and I know that devotee is a very wonderful devotee, a very sastric, very sweet devotee. I really have great affection for that devotee. So he posted it as a question, and it was related to like something else. So there was a lot of like nuance in it, but I just was looking at the topic itself, and I was answering some of the things based on just the external question, but there was some behind the scenes elements going on with that as well. So point being, there should be some caution in general. This devotee was very clear about, I guess, the intentions and everything else that was going on, and I know him to be very serious, very learned devotee. So hopefully that answered that question. So now I want to go to the second question, and I'm going to read it again because I want it to be clear. If hearing from Shri Guru removes anarthas, and I've heard, he says he's heard me say before in classes, that Guru makes the mantra swarup manifest in the heart, okay? Shouldn't we take hearing to be necessary? Yet, devotees also say that it is more important to chant as many rounds as possible, to the extent that one holds chanting to be more important than hearing. One could certainly argue for this based on many statements of our Srila Prabhupada. And he says he's also heard other esteemed devotees say like this. But to me, it seems that hearing is much more important than the value it is being given here, to the extent that once 16 rounds are completed, we should invest time in hearing rather than chanting more and more rounds. So this is a pretty long thing. So which is it? Only chanting or hearing and chanting? And if so, what is the relative importance of hearing to chanting? Why should we hear when we could be chanting? So that was a pretty long question. Hopefully everybody got it. I wanted to repeat it verbatim pretty much. So basically, let's look at the relationship between hearing and chanting. So hearing and chanting are really also part of, to make a segue from our last question, hearing and chanting is actually the energy of Bhakti Devi. There's one quote in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Bhakta Rupa Twas Touch Shakti Jivera Abhivyakta Bhagavan Eva Karanam, that actually and also Tattva Indriyadi Pravritto Sacha Iti. So the energy that any aspirant is using in bhakti, hearing, chanting, serving, etc., it is actually, Touch Shakti means the energy of Bhagavan. So it is Bhakti Devi, it is Bhakti Shakti. So it's not that there is a value difference, so to speak, between hearing or chanting or serving or remembering, right? All of these are one Shakti, but they function differently. Just like, as an example, if you take electricity, electricity is one kind of energy, but it functions in so many ways according to need. So, for instance, electricity obviously functions, if you have an electric stove, to create heat, according to the mechanisms that are arranged in the stove. In a refrigerator, the mechanisms in the refrigerator make that same energy work to produce cold. So, in the same way, hearing, chanting, remembering, or any of the elements of bhakti, first of all, they have to be activated by your own saranagati. Prahalad Maharaj clearly made this in his descriptions in this 7th canto. It's mentioned there. All of the elements of bhakti, Shravan, Kirtan, Vishnu, Smaran, Parasevanam, Archam Vandam, Dasya Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam, right? they are all only made possible iti pumsar prita Vishnu bhaktaschinnava lakshana. Only pumsar prita Vishnu. If you first do saranagati to Vishnu yourself. So first, you have to offer yourself, which means to do saranagati. Anukulyasya sankapa, pratikulyasya vivajanam, rakshishiti, goptare varanam tata, etc. So you have to offer first yourself in surrender. At that time, the real efficacy of the angas of bhakti, there are 64 angas of bhakti, distilled to 9, distilled to 5, and then kirtan is prominent among them. So this is where you get the statement that chanting is more important. But let's unpack it a little bit more. So in the kram, kram means like the sequence that's given in the 9 process of bhakti, it starts Shravan, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaran. So Shravan, or hearing, is placed first. So why would that be if actually Kirtan is more important? Now remember, there is no value to each of them in a mundane sense. I just explained they're one Shakti, they're Bhakti Shakti itself, and they subsidize the Jiva because Atahashi Krishna Namani Nabhavad Grayam Indriya. With your Grayam Indriya means your material senses, you cannot serve Bhagavan. So until you yourself have spiritual senses, right, then you have to be subsidized. And that subsidy I just explained, Jiva Goswami is quoted in Bhakti Sandarbha in that verse that I quoted earlier, Bhakti Rupa Twas, etc. So your senses are subsidized by this Bhakti Shakti, right? So why is hearing placed first? Because for most people, their Bhakti Sanskars came by some form of hearing first. Because if you were anywhere, and I'm giving just an example, but it could be a myriad of things that could have happened to create it, but generally my point being that hearing was the first thing that initiated your Bhakti Sanskars. Someone was somewhere and they heard a kirtan party. Someone was somewhere and they overheard some speaking about Krishna, or they inadvertently heard the name of Krishna. Some way, form, or fashion, hearing was the first spark that created Bhakti Sanskars in the chitta of the jiva. After that, someone may have then repeated it somehow or another. Even if they repeated it, Sanket Parihasam Vastobam Helanam Va. Even if they repeated it in some unorthodox way, meaning jokingly, if the syllables were reversed, like the example is always given that in Islamic tradition, something that is forbidden is sometimes called haram, right? So within that are the syllables of Ram. So in any way, form, or fashion, or Helanam. Helanam means with neglect. So someone is just saying in a negative way, oh, those Hare Krishnas, or something, right? So someone heard somehow or another, and then it comes into the chitta, and then it's repeated in some way, form, or fashion, right? Even if it's aparad or abas, which abas really won't come until there's some substance there. But in any way, it's repeated. So in this way, hearing is the precursor, so to speak, to chanting. In that simple sense of how the beginning of Bhakti Sanskars come into the jiva, right? Now, after a person actually has enough sukriti, Bhagavad Bhakteshu Sangena Parijayate, and they're able or have the good fortune to get satsanga of a Bhagavad Bhakta, at that time, again, hearing will become the most prominent and initial element in your unfoldment. Because now, hearing from that sadhu or guru, one has a deeper sense of the impressions of bhakti, because what you hear from sadhu or sadguru is imbued with swarup shakti. And now, especially if we go along with what I said in the beginning, now you are saranagat, you've done surrender. Now when the sadhu guru speaks, and what you hear takes the form of anubhavati, like some kind of realizations at gradual levels, and enters into the chitta, now it is different from the hearing that took place simply as sukriti that gave initial impressions in bhakti. Now these samskars that are coming are actually potency, the condensed potency that begin to remove pop and anarthas, meaning sins and obstacles, etc., etc. And it starts to give revelation of the absolute truth. Now, the chanting or kirtan, meaning whether it's kirtan meaning kirtan literally, or chanting, japa, or reciting sastra, either one of those forms of kirtan, because they're all considered kirtan in one way or another, now they're imbued with the results of realizations garnered in the heart by hearing from a Sadguru or from Sadhu. So now hearing and chanting have again taken a relationship where it appears that hearing is more important, because if you don't hear, how will you know what to chant? But why then is Nam Kirtan, meaning the chanting, given some prominence? Because if you hear, but that hearing does not take the form of realization in the heart, then you won't chant, or your chanting will be void of any kind of real substance, and therefore will offer sukriti or punya, piety, but it will not offer the elements of unfoldment to love of God. Let me repeat it. So, if you're chanting, but you're not hearing, let's take japa for instance. This is a very clear example. Harinam is the very form of Radha and Krishna. Abhinatvam namanamyo. So actually, Radha and Krishna are directly present in the sound, and the akshar means the syllables Hare Krishna, right? So directly, Radha and Krishna are present there. But you will not be able to realize the presence of Radha and Krishna unless you hear the swarup of Harinam from Sadhu Guru. You'll see the form, but you won't realize the inner mystery or the swarup of Harinam unless you hear Harikatha. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur directly made this statement, that the swarup of Harinam is Harikatha. So you have to hear that in order for your chanting to be effective. If you're repeating Namakshar, it is Sukriti, and it can even be Namabhas. And what is the efficacy of Namabhas? Vaikuntha Nama Asesha Agaharam Vidu. It can remove unlimited sins, just like in the case of Ajamil Upakyan. Simply by reciting the name Narayan, even though he's thinking of his son, it removed unlimited sins. Right? So, but if you want to unfold, to understand what is love of God, what is Krishna Prem, that requires the realizations which come from being imbued with Swarup Shakti, or the internal energy, Aladini and Sangvich potency. You understand? So that requires to hear the Swarup of Harinam, which is Harikatha. This is why Harikatha is so unlimited. 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Who knows how many thousand? Jiva Goswami Pad himself wrote 400,000 verses. And they cover everything from Tattva Siddhanta to the highest level of Rasa Vichar. So you have to hear these things, which is the Swarupa of Harinam, in order for your chanting to have the fuel or potency that comes in the subsidy, as I mentioned earlier from the verse of Jiva Goswami Bhakti Sandarbha, right? That subsidy, the real potency in it is the Harikatha coming from Sri Guru. So hearing is important to make chanting effective. Right? So some people may quote, well, actually, Mukunda Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada, there's a very famous tape that he mentions. I heard this way back in the early 70s, right? That to chant this Hare Krishna mantra, there's no need to understand the meaning of the mantra. But here Srila Prabhupada is saying, to get the Sukriti that comes from the name of Krishna, there is no need to understand it. That Sukriti then will give you Purva Sukriti Sanjate. That will give you, those previously acquired Sukritis, will give you Bhagavad Bhakta Sangha. Now, once you have Bhagavad Bhakta Sangha, then the meanings of Harinam will be revealed to you. So in the very beginning, you may not need to understand, but certainly after you create the desire. The desire arises in your heart. Oh, I want to understand. I want to know what is Bhagavan. Then yes, you have to hear Harikatha in order to understand the Swarup of Harinam. It is equivalent, and I've given this example many times, if someone will knock on your door and you open the door and you see the person standing there, well, you can actually see their form, right? You can digest, this is this person, this is the gender, the racial makeup, etc., etc. But you still don't know that person. And you won't really know that person until they open their mouths and say something. And when they say something, the Swarup means the inner quality, inner reality of that person comes out. Oh, my name is John. I am your cousin. Our aunt so-and-so sent me to visit you. All of that information now becomes what creates a relationship between you and that person. That's the revelatory nature of Harikatha. That as you hear Harikatha, the understanding of Hare Krishna, Hare Rama becomes more and more understanding that it is directly Radha and Krishna. Not only Radha and Krishna, but Radha, Krishna, their Dham, their Leela, their associates, everything. So that comes from hearing Harikatha. So there really is not a value system between what is more valuable, Harinam or Harikatha. They are one reality that are inextricable and indispensable. You can't like do one, well, I'll chant, 3 lakhs Harinam, right? But hearing Harikatha is not so important, right? No. Or if you hear Harikatha 7 days like Maharaj Parikshit, right? But then you say, I'm only going to hear Harikatha. In fact, I enjoy hearing Harikatha so much. But you don't take Nam Japa, which is directly the instruction of Mahaprabhu. Then what you're hearing won't come as spot, or spot means like realization, right? It won't allow epiphanies regarding Harinam and Krishna consciousness to come into your heart. So both things have to be there. They're of equal value, but they work in succession, just like I described electricity functioning differently. Then Harinam and Harikatha function differently at different times in your unfoldment. In the very beginning, you simply heard Harinam. From that impression of hearing Harinam, oh, that's a curious thing. Who are these people? In junior high school, I went to lunch one day with a friend. And this is, I don't know, I can't even remember. I don't want to date myself. Anyway, there was a Harinam party right under the train station. We spent our entire lunch hour just watching them. And then when we went back to school, I said, hey, man, you guys missed lunch and everything else. We didn't see you guys at the diner, whatever the case is. What were you doing, watching those crazy people? So then my friend, he said, well, at least they look very happy. And I echoed the same. I said, yeah, they look very happy, So this was some Sukriti, right? That was part of probably, at least I know my unfoldment, right? So that hearing produced a piety or punya or Sukriti, some kind of pious activity that then later led to the idea of visiting a temple or getting a book or whatever the case might be. And then that's the genesis, at least in this life, because we may have previous samskars as well or previous impressions, but that becomes the genesis in this life for either the continuing of our bhakti from previous lives or maybe the beginning of our path in bhakti. So hearing in the beginning is like that. Then we begin to chant, because when you enter the process of bhakti, emphasis is given, every day chant at least 16 rounds. So if you want to take initiation, then you need to chant at least 16 rounds. Of course, according to Shastra, there's no formality to Harinam. Harinam is not under the stricture of any kind of Shastra. There are in Padma Puran 10 offenses mentioned regarding Harinam. But Harinam itself is Radha and Krishna and Mahaprabhu, and therefore it's Swatantrita, means it's independent. It is not dependent on rules and regulations. It's clearly mentioned in Shashtakam. Tatrapita niyamita smaranena kala. Like if you were chanting Gayatri, you need to chant in certain hours, right? Your condition has to be a certain way. You have to be clean, etc., etc. But to take Harinam, there's no such rules and regulations. If you are laying down, You are not completely in a clean state. There's no rules and regulations for remembering Harinam. So Harinam is independent like that. But to give some system to helping us to unfold, then our Guru Vargas have said there should be a minimum amount of rounds chanted. So Sriman Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is mentioned that he would only, maybe Chaitanya Bhagavat, that he would only take lunch in the house of a Lakpati. Lakpati means somebody Lakpati means who has lakhs, means money, a lot of it. So, but here Mahaprabhu didn't mean that. So Lakpati here meant that he would only take prasadam in the house of those who chanted at least 1 lakh of Harinam. It is from this that our Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, instituted in Gaudiya Math that 1 lakh of rounds was the standard of chanting, 64 rounds. Our Srila Prabhupada, in coming to the West, right, even though in Gaudiya Math many devotees chanted more than 1 lakh Harinam. So that's a whole other discussion, what was their time sequence, all that, that's a different discussion. But when our Srila Prabhupada came to the West, then he realized, and here's the value of hearing, that instructing devotees in the beginning to chant 64 rounds, no one could do it. Why? Because there was absolutely no understanding or inner epiphany regarding Harinam. And to sit for 4 to 5 hours and to strictly chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, without deviated mind, without falling asleep, without distractions, would be impossible. So, obviously that was expressed to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said, okay, 32 rounds. When 32 rounds also was difficult, Srila Prabhupada said a minimum of 16 rounds. 16 rounds also, many devotees in the beginning, all of us may be chanting with distraction, with deviated mind, inability to concentrate. But by having Srimad Bhagavatam every single day, in the evening Bhagavad Gita class, and having books available for independent study, then the idea was that even chanting 16 rounds, gradually hearing Harikatha, which is a Swarup of Harinam, then gradually, the relationship and the connection between Harinam and Harikatha would be understood. And gradually as your repository of Harikatha became very deep, your ability to take Nam with some Nam Ruchi, means some taste in Nam, would start to happen. So as you become more mature, then you start to take Harinam, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But in taking that Harinam, all the Harikatha you've heard from Sadhu Guru comes into your heart. Just like I'm giving you an example. If you hear the song that was played at the first time you met your significant other or your high school prom or whatever, as soon as you hear that song, immediately it stimulates remembrance of that time, that event, the night that it happened, everything else. This is one of the potencies of sound vibration. That's a whole different class, but that's one of the potencies of sound vibration, even mundane sound vibration. So what this speak is, if you're hearing transcendental sound vibration of Harikatha, and you're chanting the transcendent name, as soon as you begin to chant, that Harikatha that you've been hearing will rise up in your chitta and manifest itself on your chitta as you're chanting. So now, perhaps you're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And what rises up on your chitta as soon as you say that are the verses of Shishastakam, Cheto Dharpanamajanam, etc. Or Vacho Vegam Manasakroda Vegam. Or if you're chanting for many, many years or something, and you've heard very deep Harikatha, Smara Kalana Kandanam, Mamasira Simandanam, Dehi Padapalava Mudaram, Priye Charusile, Manchamai Mana Manida. This is a verse from Gita Govinda. So according to your adhikar, according to your own unfoldment and maturation, as you chant, automatically it will stimulate the Harikatha that you've heard. And that Harikatha will come on your chitta. And when that comes on your chitta, it will block out the deviations of other things coming on there, because what you've heard is very tasteful. That's why Bhagavad Gita gives the quote, that the process of bhakti pratyakshvagamam damyam shushukam kartamavyayam. It is giving direct revelation. Pratyaksha means direct revelation of your internal reality. That's why it becomes tasteful to hear Harikatha while you're chanting. Not while you're chanting, but as a result of your chanting, Harikatha arises in your chitta or your consciousness, right? And shushukam kartamavyayam. It becomes something joyfully done because it gives taste. So here, that taste is a gradual unfoldment. So in this actual stage of ruchi, it becomes clearly manifest, right? There are various stages in bhakti, shraddha, sadhu shanga, to bhajana kriya. Bhajan removes anarthas. But anartha nivritti is not a separate endeavor of the jiva, because you cannot remove anarthas, right? We have no shakti, no power to remove anarthas. But bhakti has the power to remove anarthas. Bhakti Shakti has that power. That's why all of our endeavors are subsidized. I quoted that verse earlier from Bhakti Sandarbha, right? So then bhajan removes anarthas. When anarthas are removed, nishta nishchalaya yasha iti nishta. Then the chitta becomes steady. Like a lake, it becomes very clear and placid. And when the lake is clear and placid, you can see through it. Like if you go to certain areas in the world, the ocean water is aquamarine colored, but it's very clear and you can see down to the bottom, right? So similarly, when the chitta is cleared away of a lot of the obstacles and all these other things, there are 27 things, 6 stages of anushtita bhakti, 4 types of 4 anarthas, 5 types of subtle mental things like loy, vikshepa, or pratipatti, koshaya, rasaswad. All of this is mentioned in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakurpad's Madhurya Kadamini, right? Very important book to study, because actually the unfoldment of an aspirant is completely described there with all of the peaks and valleys and everything. So very important grantha or book to study, right? So as you're chanting in the stage of nishta and the consciousness is very clear and placid, now tat tat bhava adi madhure shuti dirapekshate. Na sastra na yuktingscha tal lobat utpatti lakshanam. Now the beginning of ruchi comes. Now the beginning of ruchi comes. And what does ruchi mean? Here ruchi means tat tat bhava adi madhure shuti dirapekshate. My feeling happiness or joy or getting an epiphany is not dependent just on the logic of sastra. If you hear the sweet pastimes of Krishna, they don't require analysis coming from the intellectual or mental state. But directly the inherent Swarup Shakti inside that Harikatha coming from Guru touches the chitta and creates a taste which enhances lobh. Lobh utpatti lakshanam creates the arising of lobh or greed. This sacred greed is the stage of ruchi. So what does that mean? I'm giving an example. I've given this example before. Halava, if you learn how to cook halava, you know you need some kind of farina, grains, you need a sweetener, you need water, you may want to add dates or blueberries, right? And you need butter, obviously, to cook the halava. It has to be cooked for a certain amount of time. You should see the brown color coming. Then you will add the water. Then you'll cover it and sit for a while. Then you may want to add cardamom on top. So I don't want to make anybody hungry, but I'm describing how halava is made. But when you sit down, after, even if you came to the temple for the very first time, right? I'm speaking here of devotee in maturation when I'm speaking about ruchi, but I'm saying, to make this point elucidated, you sit down and you eat halava. You never consider all of the ingredients and processes to make the halava. The first experience you have is the relishing of the taste of it itself. It doesn't require analysis. In the same way, at the stage of ruchi, when you will hear Harikatha or when you will take Harinam, naturally the sweetness of that name and that katha, which is the swarupa of Harinam, comes on the chitta. With no endeavor. It doesn't come about from your own energy. It is the byproduct of Bhakti Shakti itself. The first kind of ruchi becomes ruchi in bhajan. Therefore, having these experiences from chanting, a person thinks, oh, this chanting is so sweet. And it creates a natural desire to chant more because the process is directly reciprocating with you. This is what leads devotees to then chant 32 rounds, 64 rounds, 2 lakh rounds, etc. It's not contrived. You cannot force bhakti to come by numeric criterion, right? Criteria. I chant 64 rounds, so bhakti should come because I chant 64 rounds. Bhakti comes by the nature of one, your desire to have it, and by the Kripa Shakti of Sri Guru, and of course by the influence of Swarup Shakti. So your desire to chant 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, it comes as a natural, just like anything else. When you're a kid, you want to play all day. You don't even think about coming in to eat or do anything else because you're deriving a taste from playing. And even in your adult life, you do various things. And once those things are done and you're tasting and enjoying them, then you have a consistency with doing them. Exercising, whatever it might be, right? Whatever particular field of employment you've taken in your life, if you are working in the secular world, hopefully it was a career that you enjoyed or something, and therefore those 8 or 10 hours that you spend every day, you don't mind, right? So like this, in bhakti, when you come to the stage of ruchi, the first kind of ruchi is in bhajan itself. And in that bhajan, there's 2 divisions. Vastu Vaishishta Apekshaniya and Vastu Vaishishta Anapekshaniya. So Vastu Vaishishta means there's some special quality in the elements of bhakti. I'll give the example. When you hear a kirtan, in the very beginning, that kirtan should be very melodious. The rag and tal should be very nice. In other words, the rhythm and the melody of the kirtan should be very nice. And then you're relishing, oh, very beautiful kirtan. But if the person who's singing, their voice is not so sweet, and perhaps the instrument players are not so expert, then you may not have as deep appreciation for that kirtan. This is called Vastu Vaishishta Apekshaniya. Right? So that's in the beginning in your ruchi. Right? Then there's Vastu Vaishishta Anapekshaniya, which means when your ruchi is actually in the substance of the Harinam. Therefore, it's not dependent on whether or not the singer is expert, the musicians are very expert, right? Because your taste is come, because your taste is come in Sri Nam itself. You understand? So you don't depend on the external qualities of the rag and tal of the kirtan, or even somebody speaking Harikatha. They may not know so many verses, they may not be so expert, they may not know all the melodies of reciting the verses of Bhagavatam, etc., etc. But if the siddhant and everything is correct, then you'll taste that. You understand? Then as ruchi becomes more mature, and I'm going to end here, I don't know how I got into such a protracted discussion on this, but when ruchi becomes more mature, it becomes the Vishayi of the ruchi, the object of ruchi then becomes bhajaniya, means the object of bhajan, which means Sri Bhagavan himself, means Radha Krishna and Mahaprabhu themselves. This stage is called Ashakti, right? And in the stage of Ashakti, then the highest level of the intensity of the desire of the aspirant is manifest in the stage of Asakti. In the stage of Asakti, now only there's the awaiting of the kripa of Guru and Bhagavan, right, to descend in the form of Swarup Shakti. At that stage, Suda Sattva Viseshatma Prem Siyangsa Samyabhak Ruchi Vish Chittamasananya Kirasobha Vuchite. At that time, Swarup Shakti will descend by the nature of the ruchi coming from the abhilas, means your desire to serve, that when that comes, Ruchi Vish Chittamasananya. Masananya means to melt. So the chitta melts away, means all of the stuff that's housed in the chitta, any vestiges of material elements, all that, starts to melt away in the face of 3 prominent kinds of abhilas, means desires. 1, I want to get the association of Mahaprabhu, Radha Krishna. Secondly, I want to render service to them. And third, I want that service to come from the depth of my heart with no self-interest at all, called Sohar Dabilas. Right? So that happens in the stage of Bhav. In the stage of Bhav, when Swarup Shakti descends, it reveals both Bhagavan, but simultaneously, it also reveals your own Swarup. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has glorified Harinam for this. Mora Siddha Deha Dihe, More Siddha Deha Diya, Krishna Pose Rake Giya, E Dehera, Kare Sarvanash. Oh Harinam, please reveal to me my Swarup. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying, Harinam has this kind of power. It can take you all the way to this realization of your Swarup, meaning in the stage of Bhav. Right? And in that stage of Bhav, when your Swarup is realized, then you can do bhajan in such a way that you have one sadhak roop and at the same time you have one siddha roop. So Rupa Goswami wrote, Seva Sadika Rupena Siddha Rupena Chatrahi Tat Bhava Lipsanakara Raja Lokanusarta. So in your sadhak group, you continue to follow the Brajalok, meaning Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, our Guru Vargas, your own Guru Dev, how they perform bhajan. Therefore, even in the stage of Siddha, meaning Bhavavast, it will not be that, oh, well, I don't need to go to Mangalarti now, I don't need to chant so many rounds now because I've reached Bhav. No, rather everything will increase. Your taste for Mangalarti, for understanding that this Mangalarti is the time of Nisant Lila. Mangala Shri Guru Gauda, Mangala Murati, Mangala Shri Radha Krishna Jugala Priti, Mangala Nisanta Lila. Right? So this time is has so much uripan, means so much stimulation for your bhajan, for your mood. This time so many services are going on. I'm not describing these things, maybe we're getting out of our discussion pattern here. But this is a very important thing, that in the stage of Bhav, not that I don't need to do Mangalarti now, I don't need to chant so much because I'm in Bhav. No, the opposite happens. Everything increases, right? And simultaneously, your Siddharup, also by the depth of your meditation, when you take Harinam, then it gives you entrance into your realized form, your Siddharup, and in that Siddharup now, you're performing so many functions. So now tying that together, when you're chanting in the stage of Bhav, your chanting immediately brings up your Siddharup. Now in your Siddharup, you're singing Mangala Shri Guru Gauda, Mangala Murati. Now you're singing Mangalarti, and now having entrance into Siddharup, you yourself are participating in the activities of Nisanta Lila in your Swarup, according to your, whatever your Swarup is. So, anyway, I hope this, in an expanded way, answered the question of Prabhuji regarding the relationship between hearing and chanting. They are like the yin and yang. They have a inextricable relationship. They function differently at different times. They are composed of absolute spiritual substance, Swarup Shakti, and therefore, it's not that one has a value system of greater than the other, and they cannot be separated in any way. Because if you're chanting but you don't hear anything, what will be the meaning of your chanting? If you're hearing so much but you're not chanting, which is the very means of realizing what you hear, how will it work? So hopefully this was satisfactory. Prabhuji, I really appreciate your questions, as I mentioned to you actually on the post itself. My Dandavat Pranam devotees, I'm sorry if I got a little carried away and I went a little longer than I was supposed to go. Again, I always reach out that the reason I do this live is because there's so many senior devotees, and senior devotees can give any correction to anything I might have said wrong, and also to give further elucidation on any of these questions that come up. All right, my Dandavat Pranams, Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.